everyone, and welcome back to my channel BethChatsBooks. Now today's video is going to be a very belated August wrap up slash a currently reading status update, because I am kind of gonna word vomit a lot of things that have been going on and then kind of take it from there, because you guys are used to rambly videos anyway. So I first of all want to apologise massively for not being very present in the booktube community recently, posting videos recently. I have had a very stressful last 2 weeks. I had a friend from Canada stay over at my house last weekend, which bled into this week. Then I had to do a lot of overtime at work, so one day this week I stayed at my work long after working hours to try and get work done, and there's been a lot of work pressure for that. And so my head has been very mangled, and I haven't had any personal time because my friend was living in my house. I couldn't just set up and film, and I also was very exhausted. So I've had a good sleep, a Friday night sleep and an early night, and I feel a little bit more human to do this video. So I want to apologise for that. That will not be a consistent thing. I feel like I say that after every video, but at the moment I've just not been reading or doing anything, and I want to rectify that because this channel and this community keep me sane. So I want to make sure that I'm still active in this community, so it won't happen again. Now on to my August wrap up. I had a very disappointing August, like I've kind of just hinted at, because things were very busy. I did not get a lot of reading done at all. There are two books that I'm not really going to dwell too much on this video, but I will mention there's two books that I'm still currently reading from August, which to the back end of August to where we are in September now, I haven't picked up a book at all, so they're still in the process of being read, and that is A Spool of Blue Thread by Anne Tyler and The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, which I was reading on audiobook. Both of them I've paused, so I'm going to continue reading them this month, but I'm not going to dwell too much on them because they were incompleted in this video. So the first book I read in August, which technically I didn't finish, is The Age of Magic by Ben Okri. Now this was sent to me by Matthew from BethChatsBooks, and we were meant to buddy read it. I've mentioned previously he's annotated this and he ended up really enjoying it, and I got to a point maybe 300 pages in where I've decided to just DNF. I just couldn't get along with the story. I'm really sorry, Shazza from Hooked on Books. I'm meant to be sending it to her next, and I have absolutely just been away with the fairies, so I do need to hand this on. But I won't dwell too much into it. It was just full of a lot of cliche lines, like I've previously mentioned, very Instagrammy. I think I mentioned it in another video, which I'll link down below, of my last video that I mentioned it in. It just wasn't really my cup of tea. I didn't really get the point, and I'm particularly character driven more than plot driven, but there was no actual plot here. It's almost like somebody's trying to tell you a story and then they go off onto anecdotes and random cliches about life, and you kind of think, well, where did we get to this? Where was the actual thread that we were going down? And that's basically what it's like as a reading experience, so I did not enjoy, and I DNF'd. And then the next book that I read in the month of August was The Girls by Emma Cline. Now I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. When I first read it, and I first started the reading experience, I was really enthralled because it was just what I needed, something not very heavy that I could just get into. It's based loosely on the Charles Manson family cult, and she's a character, and it's kind of her story of how she had a very normal upbringing and kind of got coaxed into the cult. And she wasn't really present for the kind of sensationalist murders that happened later on, but she kind of feels guilt and believes that she quite easily could have been, and it's kind of her journey, and we look back on that part of her life. And then she ends up staying in somebody's house, and she meets a young couple who, the young man is the son of the person's house she's kind of renting, and that kind of takes her back down memory lane as well. At the beginning, like I said, I really enjoyed reading it, but then it kind of got slightly tedious. Julian, who I mentioned earlier, the young man, and his girlfriend Sasha, who end up moving into the house, we kind of, when we're in present day, we see a lot of things that are very wrong with Julian in his head. There's hinted at quite a lot of abuse that he performs on Sasha, and the main protagonist overhears kind of a very questionable sexual encounter from the room next door. And it's kind of frustrating because that storyline is just kind of left when they leave the house. Their future's kind of left, and it's kind of disconcerting that we meet someone who's in a very vulnerable position like Sasha, which the main protagonist herself had previously been in, and she did nothing really to stop that situation. So that was frustrating to read, to just see that Sasha walks out and we, God forbid, we never know what becomes of her. And the main protagonist, Evie, her obsession with Suzanne got quite tedious at the end. I really liked that it wasn't really that she's obsessed so much with the cult leader, that there was this kind of sexual energy between the wall that Evie felt for Suzanne, and it was kind of a little bit more of coming to terms with her identity, sexual, her personality, her development. I really liked that she was obviously questioning a lot of things about herself by this infatuation with Suzanne. That got a little bit trying. Then it became a little bit ridiculous at the end, where Suzanne comes back to see Evie for the last time. Towards that, I kind of lost the thread of where this was going. Basically put here, I've kind of got my notes down here because I do a little book log because it's been so long since I read it. Conclusion, I've put that the book was a great concept, but it failed to convince me overall. I liked that it was an adaptation of the Manson cult, and I liked the different angle. It didn't do it so solely on how besotted people were with the Charles Manson figure, but it didn't really go into a lot of depth, I felt, about an explanation of why these women turned to the crimes that they did, because we didn't really get a fleshing out very much of their relationship to the Charles Manson figure and how that escalated in the way that it did. So yes, I enjoyed it while I was reading it, but looking back, it wasn't that well written and it wasn't that well fleshed out of a concept, and obviously the Manson cults have been done to death. It didn't particularly give any insight or originality to that kind of story. So then there's that, and then the next book I read was a poetry collection which was kindly sent to me by Nine Arches Press, and that is What Are You After by Josephine Corcoran. I'm really sorry, she did actually tweet me, which is really embarrassing, on Twitter, and told me that I mispronounced it. I'm very tired today as well, and I cannot visualise how to say it. I really should have done some prep, but I just really wanted to film this video. But she is a superstar. She tweeted me on Twitter. I was blown away that she'd even watched my videos, but she had such nice things to say about my channel, and I was so happy she'd seen it. And Nine Arches Press retweeted it. So I just wanted to say, for people who are a little bit nervous about poetry, go out and contact these small publishers. Nine Arches Press couldn't do enough for me. They were so accommodating, they're so active on social media, and they really appreciate, for people like Josephine, these small reviews really mean a lot. So go out and contact them, because every single poetry collection I've received and every company I've worked with and poetry collections I've read, the people have been so attentive, but in particular Nine Arches Press and Josephine were very vocal and responsive quite quickly. And it was just such a pleasure to be so interactive. I was a little bit overwhelmed and so happy that she even knew who I was, let alone that she'd seen that I'd done a review and she watched it. So it was fantastic. So go and give love to some local people like this, because it was incredible. I really, really liked this collection. I ended up giving it 4 stars, I believe. Yes, 4 out of 5 stars. I love the fact that she was from Southport, which is quite near to where I am, and a couple of the poems in the collection were kind of harking back to her upbringing, which I really enjoyed. This deals with a lot of topical and political kind of things. I loved there was some poems that were dedicated to things like Harry Potter and the experience of reading that to your children, which obviously I really think Harry Potter is a very generational thing, and that's something I connected with. In particular, her working class poem was one I really enjoyed, which kind of dealt with her upbringing in Southport. Some of the poems in here were very emotional as well. Miscarriage, for example, was very harrowing to read. It was beautifully written. Then Sometimes We'll Think of Southport was another one where she talked about her upbringing. I particularly liked Police Say Sorry and Stephen Lawrence Isn't on the National Curriculum, because I'm quite well versed in the case of Stephen Lawrence. It's something that we talked about at school, but they recently did a documentary quite recently about the anniversary, and they spoke to his best friend who was present at his death, and it's such an important thing, and the Police Say Sorry poem deals a lot with institutional racism in the police, but also just faults within the police system, which are very relevant now. This particular collection is incredibly relevant politically and socially at the moment to the context in the UK, and so I could resonate a lot with this poetry collection, and I could connect with it in particular a lot stronger than I have with previous poetry collections, because it was my kind of level. This is a poetry collection that, if you want realist poems that have some kind of social and political context and relevancy now, then this is something that's definitely for you. I really enjoyed this collection. And then the next collection that I read was Dirty Laundry by Deborah Almer. Now, I was also fascinated because on the inside flap it talked about how she works with the poet James Shard, who she, I think, lives with now. I think they're in a relationship, but it says Dirty Laundry is her first full collection of poems. She's currently honorary research fellow at Keele University. Now, James Shard was around also at Keele while I was there, and I remember that I did a creative writing course and he came and read out his collection of poetry, because my teacher was kind of very involved in his poetry collection. She was part of the creative writing fellowship there, and so obviously going to Keele University and having links with this poetry collection, and Deborah in particular, who I never met, but I feel like once a Keele graduate, you know, always you have a bit of a connection to that place. So that was really interesting. I really liked this poetry collection because it kind of explored more feminine topics about sexuality, femininity and sensuality, which I really enjoyed. There's a lot of references to nature and the everyday objects, kind of evoking these feelings of sensuality and sexuality, and there's a few poems that have a little dash of magical realism in them as well, which I enjoyed. My favourite poems in the collection were Chocolate, He Sees Me, Thighs and The Magic Spell. So there was also a lot of intertextuality that was threaded throughout this collection, and it's nice and experimental, and I really enjoyed that. I really like poems centred around women and femininity and that kind of identity, because as a woman it's things you can kind of relate to a lot more than you can the male experience, I guess. I think I'm not going to overwhelm myself. I was planning to read some of the poems out like I did with the last collection, but I'm going to see how I get on. I think what I might make a mission for is to reread both of them and do a spotlight video in which I read a couple of poems out and do a little bit more research on Nine Arches Press, and then I can give you a more coherent video, because I just want to find that spark of energy and want to convey how much I did enjoy them. But at the moment I don't want to run before I can walk. I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed with it all. So that was everything that I managed to read in the month of August, which to me was very disappointing, considering I only really finished a book and 2 collections. I was planning to reread Harry Potter and I didn't manage to do that. So with everything that I've kind of mentioned and slightly waffled on about, what I want to do now is to let you guys know that in September I will not be doing a TBR, because I feel like I've been really overwhelmed recently with trying to film stuff, and I've just personally really took it out on myself when I haven't been able to achieve these things. So I think I will just do a currently reading, and I will then update you on how I got on with the Spool of Blue Thread and with the Bloody Chamber, which both I was thoroughly enjoying before I had this kind of mental break. It wasn't anything personal about the books. I didn't go into a bookish slump as such, and life just kind of overshadowed this as a priority. And I'm hoping to then reread Harry Potter, get a few comfort reads, but I don't want to promise you any books and not be able to deliver. So I'm just going to do a currently reading, but I'm also going to try and get a few of my tags done and kind of slowly get back into filming videos. So if you've finished this video up until this point, thank you so much. Again, heartfelt apologies for just not being present. It's just been an overwhelming time. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please hit the subscribe button if you want to be alerted for when any of my future videos come out. And I'll see you very soon. Bye now.